This video is still talking about direct and inverse variation. I'm going to go and actually do some practice problems of determining if it's direct or inverse and then using the equations to see how they're proportional to each other. So I'm going to already have my equations. Y equals k times x is direct and y equals k divided by x is inverse. It's based off of where the x is located. If I'm multiplying by x, it's direct. If I'm dividing by x, it's inverse. I'm going to go to my next section of notes. And then we have direct, inverse, and joint variation practice. Now, direct and inverse we've already talked about. Joint variation, the only thing about joint variation is that it's just a bunch of direct variations together. Joint variation is multiple direct variations. So that means we're just going to keep multiplication. Now, it actually has to say the word joint variation or jointly for you to do multiple direct variations. If it's telling you to do a direct and an inverse, that is not a joint variation. You actually have to see the word joint variation to do a multiply, 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 multiply. Okay? So what we're going to do is we got to find the missing variable. The first problem says y varies directly with x. If y equals -4 when x equals 2, find y when x equals -6. What we have to do here is determine, there are 3 parts to it. There are 3 steps to doing this problem. The first step is to determine which type of equation we're going to have. That's always the first step. So our first step, I'm going to highlight in yellow. That determines what type of variation we're dealing with. It says varies and directly. We want to find those words in there, directly. So y varies directly with x. This tells us our first information. This tells us our basic equation. Y varies directly with x. So because of that, when it says y varies means y equals. So I'm going to put y equals. This is our basic equation. Directly means multiplication. So I need, if I go back to my original, from the original notes, see direct variation is y equals k times x. So I have a k there. I'm going to put k because k comes right after the equal sign every single time. Directly means multiplication, so it's going to be k times x. That's our first step. The first step is literally always find how it varies and what with. So it says with x, that means I'm multiplying or dividing by x depending on what that variation is. The second thing we do is we got to find our k value. In order to find our k value, because our constant will determine everything for the problem, if we want to find k, we have to have a y and x together, kind of like a coordinate. So if we find, I'm going to highlight this in pink, we want to find a coordinate where we have x and y at the same time. Right here when it says y equals -4 when x equals 2. When it says, because it says when, that means that the -4 and the 2 actually go together. That -4 and the 2 go together. So this is the second thing that you want to look for, is when you have an actual coordinate. So in pink, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write in my numbers that I do have. It says y equals -4. So I can put in the -4 for that y. -4 equals. I don't have k yet, so k times, and then the x is 2. The only letter that's missing is the k. So in order to solve for this, I would divide by that 2 just to solve for k. It's the basic equation. So k is now equal to -2. So now we actually have the equation. We can actually write the equation. This actually states, I'm going to just write this in green because this is our equation, y equals -2x. This is our direct variation equation now for this problem. Now what we can do is find the rest of it. We can actually find the missing variable. The last part of this, the third part you do, so I'm going to highlight in blue, and I'll write in blue. The third part is the find. Because we're finding the missing variable, that should always be the last thing you do. We want to find y when x equals negative 6. That means we don't have the y value, but we do have the x value. So going back to our original equation, we don't have the y value because we're finding it. So we have y equals k. We just found the k, which was that negative 2. Times, the whole point of this was to find that x, negative 2x. So our x value is negative 6. So our y value, when we multiply these, is 12. Y equals 12. That's our final answer. We want to find the equation, so then we could honestly find the y value for any x value. This is our equation. We could graph this and find any coordinate we want to. If we were to graph this, we would see 2, negative 4 as a coordinate on it. 2, negative 4, because x is 2, y is negative 4. So if we did negative 2 times 2, we would get negative 4, which is correct. If we did negative 2 times negative 6, we get 12. So that's how we get that negative 6, 12. On example 2, again, we have to first find what varies and how it varies. So that's always our first step. So that's our yellow. So it says find x when y equals negative 5 if y equals 40 when x equals 16 and y varies inversely with x. That first thing we want to find is how it varies. Find that word varies and then find one of those three words, direct, inverse, or joint. So it says y varies inversely with x. That's our first thing. Y varies inversely with x. That tells us our basic equation. Y varies means y equals. So our first step is y equals. We automatically put our k. Inversely means division. So we're going to divide by the next variable. So divide by x. That's our first step. The second part, we want to find k. So we have to have a y and x together. So find the coordinate that x and y are together. It says y equals 40 when x equals 16. So those have to go together. The when tells us that they go together. So now we can actually plug those in. So if y equals 40, I can put 40 equals k over, and then the x is 16. So I would solve this by multiplying by 40 and 16, just multiply to get the k alone. We end up getting k equals 640. Now because we have the k, we actually can write our actual equation for this problem. The equation is actually y equals 640 divided by x. This is the actual variation equation. Now from here we can find any information we want. Any information we want. So on this one, we want to find x when y equals negative 5. That's the last part. Find x when y equals negative 5. So I plug this in. I want x, but I have my y. So I have negative 5 equals 640 divided by x. Now in order to solve this, you actually cannot just divide by 640. That doesn't work because x is in the denominator. We can't have x in the denominator, so we want to get rid of the fraction by multiplying both sides by x. So we end up with negative 5x equals, that goes away, we get 640. Then we can get x by itself by dividing both sides by the negative 5. So really, in the grand scheme of things, we actually just switch the x and the negative 5. You can do that. You can just switch those because that's what's going to end up happening in the end. So x will actually equal to negative 128. So again, you find what varies and how, and then find when the variables are all together. So basically, a coordinate. Example 3 says, if y equals 20, when w equals 3 and x equals 4, when y varies jointly with w and x, find w when y equals 12 and x equals 7. So again, we find the word varies, and we find how it varies. Because it says the word varies and it says jointly, that's what we want to go with. Again, jointly is just a bunch of direct variations. So it's jointly with w and x. So all those go together. So what that means, so y varies jointly. So right in our basic equation, y varies means y equals. We'll go ahead and put our k. Jointly is just a bunch of directs, so that's multiplication. So times w and x, so times x. So all those are multiplication. That's our basic one. Now we need to find k, so we have to have a y, w, and x all together. So it says 20 when 3 and 4, so that's what we want. Okay, this one says find w. We don't have all 3 letters, so we don't want to use that one yet. We want to use all 3 letters. So that's our second spot. So we plug them in. So the y is 20 equals, doesn't say k, times w is 3, and then x is 4. So we end up getting 20 equals k times 12. So then if we divide by 12 on both sides and we get a fraction, k will equal to 5 over 3. Now I do want to show you how to write this as the equation again. So we have y equals, k is 5/3, so we would put 5/3. And then you see how w and x are on top? They actually stay on top with the 5. So wx. That's our actual variation equation. So then the last part is we want to actually find w. Find w when y is 12 and x is 7. So we have the y value as 12. So we have 12 equals 5/3 times, we don't have w, times x is 7. We can actually simplify this. This is 5/3 times 7. It doesn't matter the order that they're in. This is still 5/3 times 7. That's really 7 over 1, so that becomes 12 equals 35 over 3w. Now there's 2 ways to do this. You can do them separately. You can get rid of the fraction by multiplying by 3 and then dividing by 35. Or you can take 12 and multiply it by the reciprocal of 35 over 3. So if you multiply it by the reciprocal, you would do 12 times the reciprocal of 35 over 3, which is 3 over 35. Hit math, enter. You get 36 over 35. The other way you could have done this is do it separate. So you would multiply by 3, so it would be 12 times 3, and then you would divide it by 35. You'd hit math, enter. It's the same answer, 36 over 35. So our w is equal to 36 over 35. This last problem on this example, it says y varies directly with x and inversely with z. Find z when y equals 10 and x equals 6, if y equals 8 when x equals 4 and z equals 2. Alright, so again, the first part is find the word varies and how it varies. Now it does say y varies directly with x, but it also says and inversely with z. This is not a joint variation. This is just a multi-variation, multi-variable. That's fine. This is not joint, so do not say jointly. Y varies. That still means y equals, and we put our k. Directly with x. That means directly is multiplication, so we're going to multiply by x. And inversely, we already have our k. Inversely just means division. So division, all that divided by with z. So divide by z. This is our basic equation. Now we want to find k, so we have to have y, x, and z all together. We have to have 3 numbers. Z, 10, 6. Not what we want. 8, 4, 2. That's the one we want. That's our second one. 8, 4, and 2. So it says y is 8 equals k times x is 4, and then z is 2. So then we really have, this is 4 divided by 2 is just 2. So we have 8 equals k times 2. Well, 4 times 2 gives us 8, so k is equal to 4. That's what we were trying to find. K is equal to 4. So now because we have k, we can actually write our basic equation, our actual variation equation. The variation equation is y equals 4x all over z. Now that we have that equation, we can find any information we want. And we specifically want to find z when y equals 10 and x equals 6. Okay. So when we write this out, y is 10, so we have 10 equals 4, x is 6, all over, and we want to find z. So we have 10 equals 24 over z. Now if we go back to what we did on number 2, you would actually multiply both sides by z and then divide. So we multiply both sides by x up here, and then we divide it by -5. But in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, we're actually can just switch these two values, because that's what we're going to end up doing anyway. You cannot just divide by 24. You can switch these two, and then you can simplify. So this can actually become z equals 24 over 10. And then that will just simplify to 12 over 5. Z equals 12 over 5, which would be 2 4/10. Now on these next ones, we're going to classify if they're direct, inverse, or neither, and then we'll determine the constant of variation. Okay, so it could be direct, it could be inverse, it could be direct and inverse, it could be jointly variation, or it can be neither. Okay, so first, in order to determine if it's direct or inverse, they have to have one variable completely alone. So number 6, the one variable m is completely alone. So it would be m varies. P is multiplied, so this would be a direct variation. This would be a direct variation, and our constant is -5, so k equals -5. On 7, we have C is completely alone, and E is actually on top. We are not dividing by E. We are not dividing by E. The variable is on top. That means that this is a direct variation because the variable is on top. It matters about where the variable is located, not the number. Because E, the variable, is on top, that is a direct variation. So our K value is not -4. Their constant is not -4. Remember, constant has to have a top and a bottom. The number on top is really a 1. The number on bottom is a -4. So the number on top, the top number is 1 over -4. The constant is 1 over -4, or -1/4. Number 8, we do not have one variable completely alone, so we need to fix that. So in order to fix that, we can get rid of the denominator here by multiplying by v. So we would actually have c equals 3 times v. Now c is completely alone, and v, the second variable, is also on top. So because it is multiplied to the 3, this is a direct variation. And k equals 3 is on top, nothing, and 1's on the bottom, so it's just k equals 3. Number 9, r is completely alone, so that means we can determine direct or inverse. The t is it's all divided by t, so the t is on the bottom. That means that this is an inverse. And our k is equal to, we have 9 on top and 1 on bottom. So 9 divided by 1 is 9. On number 10, we have n completely alone. So we look to where the f is located. The letter f is in the denominator, so it's divided by f, not multiplied, it's divided by f. So that means that this is an inverse variation. And k equals, the top number is 1, the bottom number is 2, so 1 over 2. On number 11, u is completely alone, so we can look for a direct or inverse. So we have I over 18 plus 7. Because it says plus 7, automatically we can't do anything. You can never have anything added or subtracted. We can't have a meaningful y-intercept, and our y-intercept for direct has to be 0. So this would be a neither. It would be a neither because of this plus 7. Because this would be a direct variation, but it has to go through 0, 0. So that's why this is neither. On number 12, the letter D is completely alone. And we actually have two variables over here, so that means we have two different types of variation. So if we look at the T is on top. That's a direct variation. So D varies directly with T. So directly with T. But then X is in the bottom, so that's an inverse variation. So inversely with X. But then we still have to have our constant. Now the constants for both of these actually, so K equals, top number is 4, bottom number is 1. So it's 4 over 1 is 4. And on number 13, we don't have a variable completely alone, so we have to get a variable alone. So in order to do that, we would divide by one of these variables. Now, you could divide by either one of them. So we could actually have two different equations. So we could have T equals negative 2/10 divided by Z, or Z equals negative 2/10 divided by T. Either one. So technically, it's still an inverse variation because we have divided by Z and we have divided by T. Either one of these equations is correct, but because T is the one variable is alone and the second variable is in the denominator, this is an inverse variation. Now your constant, K equals, the top number is negative 2/10 and the bottom is 1. So it's negative 2/10 is your constant of variation. So again, you have to be super careful about if your variable is on top or bottom. It doesn't matter about the number. And this is one of the reasons why you should not use slanted fractions. Because if I go back to number 10 real quick, I'm just going to do this on a scrap sheet of paper real quick. 1 over 2f is not the same as 1 divided by 2f like this. Because you cannot determine if this f is in the denominator or if it's multiplied to the 1/2. Because 1 over 2f means that that f is actually in the top. That's what that means. If you just have 1 over 2f like that, you have to use parentheses. Right now, this is saying 1/2 times f, so this is a direct variation. This is an inverse, this is a direct. So if you want to show me that this is an inverse, you have to put parentheses around your 2f to say that that entire thing is in your denominator. The easiest way to do this is just say 1/2 f or 1 over 2f with no slanted fractions. These two things are different because this is a direct variation, this is a multiplication, this is a dividing by f. That's why slanted fractions are not the best thing to use. Okay. This was how to determine if it's direct or inverse, and then how to actually find coordinates knowing that if they're direct or inverse. And multivariable, these are multivariable. This is jointly. It has to say the word jointly. Jointly just means you're multiplying a whole bunch of different ones.